Hello and welcome to the editing tutorial for the DC film presets. These presets were originally created to be exclusive inside Rise Photo Academy as part of our film course, but I am so excited to share them with you. In the film course, I partnered with my friend Josie Brooks, who is a luxury wedding and destination photographer known for incorporating a lot of film in her work. So in this video, I'll be featuring both her images and my own, and I'm just going to walk you through how I edit using these presets. So I'll share how I choose one preset over another depending on what fits the image itself and depending on the style that I want to achieve, as well as how I make adjustments within Lightroom. So let's dive in. I've pulled a wide range of different images here. You can see at the bottom, there's everything from portraits to landscapes to indoor and a ton of different styles. So we are going to be walking through each one and just trying these presets on. So you'll see that the pack comes with a black and white classic, expired, and soft, and then it comes with 3 expired colored presets and then 4 other color film presets. So the 4 color ones are broken into 2 categories. I've broken them into Fuji and Kodak. They are not specific to an exact film stock. I kind of wanted to just give the overall vibe and look of Fujifilm, which is more pastel and soft, and the overall look of Kodak film, which is typically more earthy. So we will kind of just walk through them and I'll show you how I would use them on different photos. So just to give you a preview, I'll click through each one so you can see it on this image, and then I will pick which one I would use for each photo as we go on. So here's the black and white classic. It's very crisp and clean and has good contrast, and it's a really versatile black and white. And then you have the black and white expired, which is crushed highlights and shadows, lots of grain, and then black and white soft, which just has softer contrast, more gray tones than black and white. And then the film expired are more experimental looking, fun to play around with on some images. Probably not something you're going to be using for entire galleries if it's something you're delivering to a client, but maybe for those special images that you want to look more artistic or look like film, and maybe some select images that you want to post on social media or something. So we've got a range of those here. And then we have the Fuji inspired presets. So we've got 2 of those, one with more green tones, one with more purple tones. And then we've got Kodak. We have 2 of those, and they're a little earthier and moodier than the Fuji. So in this one, I would probably opt for one of the Kodak just because it seems like a more earthy, moody picture with the stormy clouds and just the earth tones that are in the image. So I'm just hovering over to see which one I like better, probably Kodak 1. And then all I would really do is probably bring up the shadows a little bit to bring some detail back in his suit, maybe make it a little less magenta and a little warmer, and I'd probably leave it there. So in images like this where they are kind of out of focus, it feels more documentary, like a snapshot, that's one that I might try some of those expired films. So I'm just going to hover over these, and I think I would probably use this one. I could always tone down the grain if I wanted because there is a lot of grain in these. So you can go down and just bring that grain down if you don't want it to be as intense. But if you want to really give it that expired look, leave it in there. I wouldn't do a ton to this. I kind of like just the different colors that it's giving, maybe warm it up a little bit and maybe make it a little less magenta just to really play up those green tones. Okay, next I wanted to show a moodier, darker image and how that expired film really stands out when there's a lot of blacks in the image. So you can see here, it really makes those shadows pop with the colors that are in the shadows. So I think these are really fun to use on images like this. But if you are wanting something more natural looking, I think probably one of the Kodak ones here, probably this one that brings out the greens, and then I would probably just warm it up a little bit, maybe brighten it, make it a little more magenta. and leave it somewhere around there. If I wanted to tone down the green tones a little bit, I could do that by just bringing the saturation of green down. I could also go into my color grading and just take the shadow colors down a little bit so that it's not so intense. Here's another one that works really well with all of them and kind of just depends on what look you want to go for. It looks really nostalgic and filmy here with these expired films. And then the Fuji one, you can give it a more editorial kind of pastel look, maybe bring up some of that exposure. Fuji tends to work really well with that brighter, lighter, less contrasty style. And so you can play that up just by bringing some of the shadows up. You can bring the contrast down just to give it that soft look. If you find that the greens are maybe a little too blue in some of the images, that is a trait of Fuji film, but you can always just bring this green hue a little warmer so that it tones those down. For this one, initially, I'm just going to brighten it a little bit because it is a little dark. And then I would probably use one of the Kodak ones here, but I'm just going to see what the other ones look like. I also like these Fuji ones on this. It brightens it up a bit and doesn't crush the shadows as much, but I think I'm going to make it more of that earthy, filmy feel with one of the Kodaks. And sometimes these can pull a little bit warm, so if you want to tone that down, you can always adjust your white balance a bit first, and then you can go into split toning and just take some of the green out or go in and take some of the highlights down. But I'm liking that it feels warm and a little bit retro from some of those green shadows. This is a photo taken on my point and shoot, my Canon G7X, and I like how these images come out because without any editing, they feel kind of like film or just a little bit retro and a throwback in a way because we used point and shoots like 10, 15 years ago, and it just gives it that feel. And so I really like how it takes these presets because it kind of plays up that filmy, nostalgic feel. So I'm just going to hover through these, and you can see that just depending on your style and preferences, any of these will work. Even the expired ones make it look like a disposable camera. So depending on what you prefer, I feel like these would all be good options. I'd probably go with this one. And here's a situation where the blues are really saturated, mostly from the camera. But if you find that that's not your preference, you can always just bring the blue saturation down. You can also bring the luminance of that up. But overall, I'm liking how this is looking. On this one, I would probably go with one of the Fuji ones just because it seems like a softer, more ethereal image that I want to look a little more editorial. So I would probably use this first one, and I would probably just cool it down a little bit to give it that softer look and help her skin tones out a little bit. They were getting a little orange, and then I want to play up the blues in the background even more. So I'm going to just bring the saturation of blue up, and then you can always adjust the hue of the blues as well if you want them to be more aqua or more purple. I think I'm going to go for something a little bit in the middle and probably leave that there. This is another one that I would probably go for the Fuji presets because it is that softer, more bridal editorial look. So first I'm going to just brighten it a little bit and then hover over my two Fuji options. I like the pink highlights in this one, so we'll go with that. And there isn't a ton I would do. Maybe bring the shadows up a little bit just to make it a little bit softer. Maybe increase the exposure just by one more and probably leave it there. If you wanted to make the whites pop even more, you could go into the tone curve and just bring the lights up a little bit to just give it that bright look. This one, you can see just how different the whole vibe is with each different preset. And I think in these ones, I want to go for one of the expired ones just because it makes it feel like it's a film snapshot or a disposable camera. So I think I'll go with this one and then just bring up the shadows a little bit, maybe the exposure a little bit. I'm going to bring the temperature down just a tad, and I might make the greens a little bit warmer by bringing the green hue over to the yellow side. Okay, on this one, I'll brighten it a little bit, and then I'm going to just hover over my presets. I think the black and whites work really well. The expired ones are really fun in here, and you can see that different hues and tones come out more when there's a lot of dark tones in the image, with the expired ones especially, and then also when there's a lot of white in the image, it's a lot easier to see the different tones that are in the split toning and the tone curve. And here you can see in the highlights there's some more warm pinkish hues here. This is like a darker purpley tone, and then a brighter, more blue tone. So depending on what you're looking for. And then the Fuji ones are nice in studio lighting because they're really crisp and clean and light. And then the Kodak ones work as well. They're a little earthier and darker, but I think I'm going to go for probably this third expired one and just brighten it a little bit. And here I might just bring the highlights and whites up a little bit to make them pop. You can also mess with your tone curve if you want to adjust these tones in the highlights and shadows. So you can see this is moved a little bit onto the blue side, which is giving it that blue highlight. But if you don't want that, you can move this over to that corner so that it is a warmer highlight. But the thing with expired film is it does have a lot of different tones and colors in the shadows and highlights, so that's why those are there. Okay, for this one, I've always edited this image black and white, so let's just hover over the black and white options here. I think I'm gonna go for the expired one, and then maybe just give it a little bit more contrast and brighten it up a little bit. I wanted to include a landscape so you can see the different feeling that it gives to that. So here's a black and white, which I think looks really pretty and moody. I would probably just brighten it a little bit. We've got the expired one, which I like as more of a artistic take on it. And then the soft. And then we've got our expired color, which I really like all these as well. They're all just so different. We have Fuji, which in this case, I really like Fuji 2 because it has those purple tones in there that give it more dimension. This one's looking a little flat. This one's a little cleaner and maybe more versatile, but I like how this one is pulling the blues and purples out. And then we've got our Kodak, which I think in this one, I really like the green shadows here. So I'd probably go with one of those. So let's do Fuji 2 and then just brighten it a little bit. And I think in order to play up those blues and purples, I'm just gonna bring the vibrance up, maybe brighten it a little bit more, add some contrast. And then I think I'm gonna go in here and just bring some more saturation into the blues and purples. Maybe brighten it a little more, make it a little more magenta. Okay, now onto some of Josie's images. You can see the expired ones really give it a cool look with all the shadows that are in here. And then the Fuji ones are a lot cleaner and brighter. You can really see the differences between them a lot more in certain images. And then the Kodak ones are more earthy and moody. I think in this one, I'm really liking one of the expired ones, probably the third one, or the second Fuji one. I'll go for the Fuji one and just bring the blacks up a little bit, maybe the contrast down, exposure down, and then I think I want to take some of the vibrance down a little bit just to soften it. Okay, here we will just hover over some of these options. This is another one where I really like how the expired ones look because it just feels like a snapshot on film. But I would probably go for this Kodak one and then just bring the warmth up a little bit, bring the exposure up a little bit, maybe make it a tiny bit more magenta. Here, because it's not a portrait, I feel like it's a lot easier to get away with using expired film presets. So I think in this one, I'm going to go for the first one, maybe add some vibrance, warm it up a little bit, maybe make it a little more green. This is another one where I feel like because there's so many shadows and it is just kind of a snapshot looking image, an expired preset would work really well. I think I'm going to go for this third one again, which is becoming my favorite, I'm realizing, and just brighten it a tiny bit, maybe make it a little less green. Okay, here maybe let's try one of the black and whites. So I think I'm going to go for this expired black and white, realizing I love expired film, and just brighten that a little bit. This is one that immediately just screams Fujifilm to me. Just everything about it looks like the tones already of Fujifilm and just the environment and style of the venue. So I'm definitely going to use the Fuji presets on this. You can see it definitely works with the other ones too. And even with these Kodak presets, it's giving more of that Fujifilm vibe. But I think I'm going to go with Fuji 2 and then just bring the exposure down a little bit. I still want to keep it brighter, but maybe I'll bring the highlights and whites down just to save some of those highlights. And then I think I'll warm it up a little bit and make it a little less magenta because I'm seeing a lot of purple tones, but I want to keep some of those since that is a characteristic of that film. Okay, for this one, I'm going to just hover over each of these. And I'm liking the third expired one. I'm liking this second Fuji one. And probably that first Kodak one. I think I'll go for Kodak 1. And then because the contrast is so strong with the lighting here, I'm just going to save some of those highlights by bringing these down. Maybe bring some more detail into the shadows by bringing the shadows and blacks up. And then I'll warm it up a little bit and maybe make it a little more green. And then I want to bring some of that detail and color back into her bouquet. So I'm going to go down here and add some saturation to green and yellow. And I'm just keeping an eye on her face so that it doesn't get overly saturated because there are some yellow tones in her face. But I think maybe bringing the luminance of yellow down a little bit too will help with that. And then I can bring the luminance of orange up also to give some lightness back to her face. And I think I'm going to go in here and just bring the highlights down even more and the lights down even more. And then we have this flash image. I'm going to just brighten it a little bit and then I'll hover over each of these. You can see that they all pretty much work here, but definitely give really different looks. And in this case, I'm really liking these expired ones. I think probably this first one, and I'll just brighten it a little bit, and then I'm gonna give it some more vibrance, maybe make it a little bit more magenta and a little warmer. Then I wanted to share some product photography so you can just get the whole spectrum on these. So here's the classic, expired, soft, and then we've got these expired ones. I think for this one, I would probably go with one of the Fuji presets because I want to give it that softer, more high-end feel. So I think I'm going to go for this second one, and then I just want to add a little bit of vibrance back in to give more color to the perfume. And then I think I'm going to just bring the temperature down a little bit so that it's not so warm, and maybe bring the tint up a little bit. I'll increase exposure. I'm gonna go down a little more with the temperature, and I think that's good. Okay, and then I like sharing some of these blurry images because I think they're really fun to use with the more experimental presets. So we have the classic expired, which is probably what I would use for a black and white on this. And then we have the expired color, which I would probably go for this one and maybe just take the temperature down a little bit, make it a little more magenta, and leave a lot of those green hues in there. And then I'll show you what it would look like with these other ones. I like these, but probably not as much for this style of an image. And then the Kodak ones are fun too. I feel like it really pulls out the true tones that you see in Kodak film. So I'm liking how these are looking. I'd probably go for this second one and just warm it back up a little bit. And then finally, it's me and my best friend. I am going to just hover over each one. So for an image like this, that's more of a studio shot, I'd probably use Classic or one of the Fuji presets because they're more crisp and clean. And especially with all the white tones in here, I feel like they work pretty well. The Kodak ones also work, and I'm liking this a lot too, but I'll just go ahead and show you how I would edit maybe with this second Fuji one. I think the main thing that it needs is just a little bit more saturation and vibrance in our skin tones and hair. So I'm just going to bring the vibrance up a little bit and then maybe fine tune that with HSL. So I'll go in and maybe make the orange a little less yellow and also bring up the saturation of orange. And then I think I want to make these whites a little bit whiter, so I can bring the highlights and whites up, and I can also go down here and just bring the lights up. Okay, and there you have it. Those are the new film presets. I am so excited for you to get your hands on them and use them. I hope you find them really useful and versatile and have a lot of fun playing around with them. This is definitely my most versatile pack as far as a lot of options and variation within a pack, and I'm just so excited to see how you use them on your work.